Hi, everyone. My name is Adam Riskin, and I'm from Revelwood. And welcome to our webinar today on reducing time spent on accounting close processes. So just a few words about Revelwood. So we've been working with finance and accounting teams for over 25 years. And we've worked with a very large number of companies in that time span, well over 500. And this requires us to be not just technologists, but also able to talk the talk of finance and accounting. Most of our staff are either former accountants or former finance managers that decided to move into the technology world. So it really allows us to speak the language of our customers and offer more than just a technology implementation. So here at Revelwood, we focus on four main products: IBM Planning Analytics and Workday Adaptive Planning. And those are both budgeting and forecasting and reporting type solutions. Fluence is a financial consolidation tool. And of course, BlackLine there, that's to automate accounting processes. So if you think about how finance operates in most businesses, there's usually a monthly cycle that includes planning, closing the books, consolidating, reporting and analyzing. And automation can be applied to all those activities. And the solutions that Revelwood support cover that entire scope of work. So here's the hamster wheel. So let's face it, most people are using Excel to do many of those activities manually. And many of them feel like this hamster in the wheel. Our intention with automation, and specifically with BlackLine, is to help you get out of this wheel, allowing you to spend time on more value-add activities. So the agenda for today's webinar, first, I'll talk a little bit about the challenges with doing accounting tasks manually today and the negative impact that it could have on your team. Then I'll cover BlackLine as a company and the different software modules that they offer. And then after that, we'll do a deep dive into the three main software modules that can be used by almost all accounting departments. And I've included screenshots of the software as part of this. And then lastly, I'll share some customer success stories. Okay, all right, so traditional manual accounting processes just are not sustainable. So for many accounting teams, most tasks are done manually in Excel today. And these are things like reconciling bank statements and balance sheet reconciliations and flux analysis, and having to create accrual and amortization schedules, or even just trying to compare data from two different files. And Excel is a great tool, and it helps to complete a lot of these tasks. But even with all its great features, it still has limitations. You still have to manually key in amounts and make sure formulas don't break. You got to roll forward schedules from prior months. You have to make sure that your amounts always tie back to the general ledger. And all this work is really being done by you and your team. It's very labor intensive. And once you're done doing all this work for the month, then you got to do it all over again the following month. So why is manual accounting not sustainable? So it really boils down to four things: time, risk, cost, and morale. The number one reason by far that manual accounting processes aren't sustainable is just the time it takes to complete them. So I've worked in organizations where the accounting team spend 2 weeks each month just doing bank and balance sheet reconciliations. That's 2 weeks doing these activities. And I've talked to a lot of other accounting managers that say their team is in the same situation. Now think about all the other responsibilities accountants have and new responsibilities that get added to their plate. Could be a new acquisition, or it could be a company restructure, or any other project that comes down the pipe. When your accounting processes are manual, you have less and less time to complete them. The second reason manual accounting processes aren't sustainable is risk. It's really easy to make a mistake when you're doing accounting tasks in Excel. If you're doing a schedule in Excel, you could accidentally type in a wrong amount from your general ledger. Formulas can break. And when you're using Excel and a mistake is made, sometimes it's really hard to catch. So what it all leads to is increasing your risk of things like inaccurate financial reports, completing tasks after its deadline, or maybe missing a task altogether and not completing it. The third reason manual accounting processes aren't sustainable is that there's a huge cost to it. So when your processes are manual, they require people to do them. And people got to get paid. So if your company is growing or you have an increase in projects for workload, you'll have no choice but to hire more people to handle that additional workload. And that's just going to drive up your costs. And lastly, the fourth reason manual accounting processes aren't sustainable is around morale. So for some accountants, manual repetitive tasks just wear them down, and it could really lead to low morale. And when that starts occurring, turnover starts to increase, which now requires your management team to spend time on things like recruiting, interviewing, and training. And that's not the value add activity where people want to be spending their time. So the idea here is to try and increase the capacity of your existing staff and resources using BlackLine. We all have a finite number of hours in a day, and many companies spend most of their time on the regular monthly and quarterly and year-end tasks. And this limits the time you can spend on bigger projects and initiatives. You may need to do things like provide better data analytics or train your workforce or upgrade your ERP system. But a lot of times those projects get shelved because there isn't enough time to do it. And if you could use a software like BlackLine to reduce those manual processes, you increase your capacity to do those more value-add activities. Okay, so a little bit about BlackLine as a company. All right, so they specialize in software forward accounting. This is all that they do. Almost all their time and resources are dedicated to it. A lot of their employees are either former accountants, former users of the software, or both. And they're experts in software and accounting processes, and it's translated into a great product. The company's been around for a long time. They are publicly traded, so you can find a lot of financial and operational information about them on the internet. And in a nutshell, they got a huge number of users, a huge customer base across the globe, and they're recognized as the best in the industry. Okay. All right, so this slide here, this really represents many of the software modules that BlackLine offers. You'll notice at the bottom, these three modules down here that are classified as core, okay? What is the matching module? Okay, and that lets you match records from multiple data sources against each other. The most common example of what this would be used for is a bank reconciliation. The second core module that you see over here is the account reconciliation module. That's the module used to automate all your balance sheet reconciliations. And the third module down here is the task management module. And in this module, you can create things like checklists, like your month-end close checklist or an audit checklist. Now, BlackLine calls these modules core because they studied their existing customer base and found almost all their customers use them. So what they did is they created this, essentially the starter bundle offering for new customers. And it consists of the three core modules and can be implemented in 2 to 3 months. So it gets you the software that you truly need and up and running quickly with it. And I'm going to cover these three modules in more detail in a little bit. Now you'll see other modules up here on the top, okay? The big ones, some of the big ones are, you got one module over here that can post journal entries to your ERP system. So for one, it gives you a central repository to create and approve your journal entries. It can also create journal entries based on an accrual or a prepaid schedule, or even data that you've loaded into the system like a bank statement. Another module over here, okay, that lets you do advanced transaction matching. So for example, it can match records from 3 different data sources or match records from non-financial systems. And I'll cover this in more detail in a bit. And the third one over here, okay, this is for flux analysis that you typically do on your income statement. So it will actually compare your GL account balance against a prior month. And if the variance is outside a threshold, it will flag it for further research. So the suggested approach for new customers is really to start off with these 3 core modules down here. And after you've been using them for a bit, then add on these additional top modules up here as needed. But it is just a suggested approach. Each company has different needs. And if your company needs to mix and match from day one, we're happy to do that for you. Okay, so let's take a look at that first core module, the matching module, okay? When we're talking about matching, we're talking about matching records from one data source to another. And again, the most common example is your bank reconciliation, where you're taking records from your bank statement and matching it up against your GL or other system where you're posting payments. Now, the world of matching data files is very familiar to me because when I started off in accounting, one of my main responsibilities was reconciling all the cash accounts. And we had one bank account for each dental office that we owned. And I clearly remember sitting in my office with the Iron Mountain boxes stacked up against the wall. Each one was stuffed with deposit slips and copies of checks and credit card merchant statements. And I had to sift through all that paper to complete each bank rec. And there's two things I really clearly remember from back in the day. The first is all it took was for a handful of transactions to be posted incorrectly to make a bank reconciliation really difficult to complete. So when someone posted a payment with the wrong date or wrong amount, I could be looking for a needle in a haystack. The second is when I found an issue that required help from an office manager or the payment poster. When I reached out to them at month end, they either didn't remember the issue or told me that they didn't have time to research it. So it always left me no choice but to classify it as kind of that unapplied or unknown and post an adjusting journal entry to correct it. So when I learned about BlackLine's matching capability, I realized how much it would have helped me back in the day. Okay, so just to set the stage, okay, this is how a lot of companies do matching today. And it's a simple example of a bank reconciliation. So what typically happens is, they take the general ledger or the subledger data and the bank data, and they dump it out to an Excel file, and they put them side by side and then match records, but one by one. So for example, on my bank statement, I got check number 1791 for $467,000. Let me go find that on my GL or my subledger file. Oh, here it is. And then either cross it off or color code it. Okay. Now here's how it's done in BlackLine. Okay. BlackLine does all that manual matching for you. So this is a flow chart of how it works for a regular bank reconciliation. So on a scheduled basis, and that's over here. Okay, on a scheduled basis, BlackLine is going to import your bank and your GL or subledger transactions. It's going to run the files here through its matching engine, where pass rules are used to compare and match records from both files. Now, the records that are successfully matched get put into this matches bucket up here. And then records that are not successfully matched go into this exceptions bucket right over here. And that's where a user would go in and then manually research and manually match those remaining records. So if the matching engine can match 90% of your records, all you need to do now is spend time on manually matching those remaining 10%. It should be a huge time saver for you. And now on the pass rules, okay, the pass rules could actually handle very complex scenarios. So it can do things like a one-to-many match, where it takes one bank record and that matches it up to multiple GL or subledger records. It could even do many-to-many match, where it matches multiple bank records to multiple GL or subledger records. So let's take a look at an actual example in the software. So I'm starting off with a simple match example here. A bank file with deposits versus a point of sale file, which really could be any system where payments are posted. This is what the system looks like after the data is loaded, but before the matching is run. Bank transactions are on the left over here, and then my point of sale transactions are on the right. Now I color coded the transactions to just show logically how they should match. So for example, this $14,000 bank deposit over here should match to these 4 payment transaction records over here. And that's what we call a one-to-many match. So let's take a look now at a pass rule. So remember, the pass rules are the logic that compares and matches the records from your data files. So on the previous slide, it showed that we needed to create a one-to-many match pass rule. This section over here, okay, this is where I set that up. And I'm basically grouping and summarizing the amounts. And this section down here, okay, sorry. Sorry about that. So in this section down here, I set up the pass rule to then compare the payment number and the amounts from both files, okay? Now, I know you're not familiar with these specific data files and field names. So that specific logic that I'm walking through might seem a bit confusing. But the real point of showing you this slide is just to show you how easy the logic can be created. There's no coding or special programming that you have to do. You're not seeing it on the screen here. And basically, any accountant who's familiar with the data can set up these pass rules. You shouldn't need any help from your IT department to do it. One other important thing to note is that you can have the system match records with different amounts using what BlackLine calls as thresholds. So for example, let's say I set up a threshold of $1. If I have a bank deposit for $100 and a point of sale record for $100.99, the system will mark it as a good match because that difference is less than that dollar. Now, let's take this example one step deeper. Let's assume we've loaded our bank statement and point of sale file and now ran the matching engine. This is what the bucket of match records looks like. It's basically a full audit trail of each match record. On the top screenshot over here, okay, this is my summary view. So for example, the first record tells us that one deposit on the bank statement over here, okay, matched up to 4 records on my point of sale file using the one-to-many pass rule. Now, to get a more detailed look, if I were to click on this ID number over here, then this bottom screen pops up and it shows me the actual detailed transactions. So the top over here, this is my actual bank transaction. And on the bottom here, these are my actual 4 complete point of sale transactions. So again, you don't have to spend any time matching these records. The system did all the matching for you. And the audit trail is available for you to review if you'd like. So now how about those records that didn't match? Let's take a look at the exceptions bucket. Okay. All right, so this is what the exception bucket looks like. It shows all the deposits in the system that it couldn't match. So in this example, all that's remaining is the $72,000 bank deposit. This could be a payment that was never posted into my point of sale system. Now, once it has been posted, BlackLine is going to automatically match it for me. Let's say you have other transactions in this exceptions bucket, several that show up from your bank statement and several from your point of sale file. You would manually match them in this section here. Okay. So that, in a nutshell, is how matching works for a bank reconciliation. Now, one other big thing to note here, you can schedule your matching to run at any frequency you wish. So a lot of companies, they match their bank statements to their point of sale transactions on a weekly or even daily basis. They don't wait till month end. And there's several benefits to this approach. One is that issues are immediately flagged. So you're not waiting till 30 or 45 days later to find out something goofy happened. If a deposit hits your bank and it isn't posted into your point of sale system, or it's posted incorrectly, you could research that right away. The second benefit to reconciling more often is that you'll be working with a much smaller data set. It's much easier to find and research exceptions when you're working with records for a day versus a batch of records for a month. Another benefit is that you'll have just one less thing to do during the month-end close. You're actually completing the reconciliation throughout the month, and it's going to be done before the close even begins. And the last benefit to point out is you'll know your cash position daily. By loading your bank statements daily, the system can consolidate and quickly show you your bank balances. And this is going to help you out managing cash flow. So at one company I was at before, we had one person spending 1 hour each day just downloading all the bank statements and consolidating in Excel. And it helped us to know if we had enough cash in the bank to pay our bills and payroll, or if we needed a pull from our line of credit. Now, if we had a BlackLine, we could have just scheduled our bank files to import each morning and then just run a report to tell us our cash positions. Now, I've been using the bank reconciliation example to explain matching because it really should be familiar to everyone. But one thing I want to make very clear is, for one, BlackLine can match data files from any source system. These can be operational systems, payroll systems, budgeting system, any system where you could extract the file. And secondly, it could actually match up to 3 data source files, not just 2. So let's take a look at another matching example. Let's actually look at where we're doing a three-way match. So here, this is an example of a credit card merchant statement versus a bank statement versus general ledger transactions. Okay. So this is what it looks like after the three data files are loaded into the system. I got my credit card statement transactions on the left, my bank transactions in the middle, and my GL transactions on the right. And the green arrows, they show me how all the records from the three files should match to each other. Now, let's assume I ran these data files through the matching engine. BlackLine is going to do all that matching for me. And this is what the match bucket looks like, okay? It shows me a full audit trail of how each record on the credit card statement matched up to a record on the bank statement, which matched to a record on my general ledger. And each match record has a timestamp of when the match occurred and the pass rule used to complete the match. Again, full audit trail of how the system matched these records. Okay, all right, so now let's change gears and talk about the second core module. Okay, and this is the account reconciliation module. And this is the module you use to do your balance sheet reconciliations. So this module hits home for me as well. And as I mentioned before, at one company I worked at, they had 5 accountants spending 1 week each month just doing their balance sheet reconciliations. It was a huge manual process that just ate up a significant amount of time of the accounting team each month. So I saw it firsthand how they always had to, run their balance sheet reports and then key in the GL balances into a spreadsheet and then see if any entries were posted into that account for the current month, and then key in the supporting items. And when everything was complete and the rec was finished, they had to print it all out and put them into binders. It was just a very manual and time-consuming process. So let's take a look at how balance sheet reconciliations work in BlackLine. The system reduces much of the manual effort and creates a single repository for the reconciliation itself. So what you're looking at here is it's a flow chart. And the black box in the middle represents the actual reconciliation. The blue box on the top, that represents information you enter into a reconciliation the first time it's set up. So BlackLine gives you the ability to enter an explanation on why the reconciliation is being done and enter step-by-step instructions of how to complete that reconciliation. The blue boxes on the left, those represent information that gets entered each month you complete the rec. So for example, your GL balance, that's actually going to be imported from your ERP system. You'll either enter your bank and subledger balances, or you could have those imported as well. You'll also enter all your supporting items and schedules and attach all supporting documents and key in any comments that you wish. And once all this information is entered, you have 2 options to mark the reconciliation as complete. And that's represented by the right side of the flowchart. So the first option is using BlackLine's auto certification rules. That's the system certified method over here. Okay. So BlackLine actually has the capability to mark your reconciliation as complete if it meets certain criteria. They call that its auto certification rules. So for example, if your account has no activity or a 0 balance, or your amortization schedule matches up to your GL balance, the system can mark that reconciliation as complete for you. The user doesn't need to spend any time at all reconciling that account. The second method to complete a reconciliation is down here. Okay, that's the workflow method. That's where you're going to have an accountant or a preparer who's going to gather up all the supporting documents and mark that reconciliation as complete. Then an approver, reviewer, or whoever else you wish downstream will be able to sign off on it. So let's take a look at an actual rec. So this is an example of an actual prepaid reconciliation of BlackLine. So it's what users see when they're entering information for a reconciliation or reviewing it. So let's go over each section. The first thing you see at the top is the GL account string and description. The next section over here is where you enter your supporting items. So in this example, it's your prepaid items. Every item entered has an amount, description, start date, and end date. And since it's made up of amortizable items, the system is going to roll it forward for you each month. The GL balance over here, okay, that's automatically imported from your ERP system. Users can't manually change it or update it at all. It puts a hard control in place that your GL balance is always correct. The next section down here is where you can enter comments. So you can enter anything like general comments or maybe a specific comment to an approver or reviewer who's going to be looking at this downstream. In the bottom section down here, okay, that's for attaching your supporting documents. So you can attach things like PDF invoices or Microsoft Word contracts or any other Excel files that you want. So now let's take a step back and compare this to how you might be doing your reconciliations today. With BlackLine, your GL balances are imported from your ERP system. So there's no need to key them into spreadsheets anymore. All your supporting documents are attached directly to the reconciliation itself, instead of saving them across a file share. So it makes finding those documents and emailing them to a manager or auditor much less time consuming. All the comments are stored within the reconciliation instead of buried within emails. And now there's no need to manually roll forward your prepaid and amortization schedules anymore. The system does all that work for you. So what we just looked at are the main items you can enter to complete a balance sheet reconciliation. Let's take a look at some of the setup options now. So this is the setup options for a prepaid for our prepaid account reconciliation. And I'm just going to go over the important pieces of the screen. The first up here, okay, that's the account currency. And I really just highlighted this just to point out that the system handles multi-currency chart of accounts really, really well. The second is that the certification threshold. So the system compares my GL balance to my supporting items total amount. And it only allows me to mark that rec as complete if the difference is within this threshold. So for example, this account threshold is set up for $100 or 5%. If my GL balance and supporting items difference is over $100 and 5%, the system is actually going to prevent me from marking it as complete. It has that kind of control in place. The third is the assignment settings, okay? And the two important pieces here is one is it tells you who's responsible for preparing the rec and who's responsible for approving it. Secondly, it tells you the frequency the rec needs to be prepared and the frequency it needs to be approved. In this case, the reconciliation needs to be prepared and approved each month, but you can change those frequencies to whatever you want, quarterly, annually, any other frequencies that you wish. You got a purpose section down here, okay? That's the details why you do the rec. And then here at the bottom, you have your reconciliation procedure. And this is a detailed step-by-step instructions on how the preparer completes the rec. Now, this screen emphasizes some additional benefits of using the system. So, first is that it verifies the GL balance and supporting items are always within that acceptable threshold. Approvers, reviewers, and anyone part of the workflow receives email notifications when the rec moves into their queue. The purpose and reconciliation procedures, they're in a location now that everyone can get to. It's not in someone's head or buried out onto a file share. So to me, this is actually a very important piece. Because if you have someone out on PTO or leave the company, and your policies and procedures are well written, it makes it very easy for someone else to pick up that workload. And another great use case is around your audit. So you can actually give your auditor direct access to the rec. All your reconciliation details and supporting items are available for them to view. You'll no longer need to gather them up and email to them at the end of each year. Another piece to this balance sheet reconciliation example is that since it's a prepaid account, it actually generates a nice roll forward report for you. So in this example, the current month is June 2021, and that's represented by the shaded column here. Okay. And you can see here from this report, you can see all the prior month's activity and what the future months roll forward amounts will be. Now, the last piece I want to talk about for account reconciliations is around visibility. So BlackLine provides dashboards and reports that quickly show you how many recs you're responsible for and what the statuses are. So here's a dashboard a user sees when they first log in. This tells me that this number over here, 23, that I'm responsible for preparing 23 reconciliations. 7 of them haven't been started yet. 1 of them has been completed but not yet approved. 5 of them over here were system certified. So that meant that they had those GL accounts had a 0 balance or no activity. So BlackLine's marked those as complete for me. And then these 10 over here, these are the 10 reconciliations that have been completed. Okay, tells me exactly what my status is at any point in time. So here's a great management report. So this lets a controller see the status of all reconciliations across all accounts at any point during the month-end close. You got a nice graph on top telling me the total amount of reconciliations by status. And by hovering over each bar, I can see the specific number. So in this example here, it's telling me that 363 reconciliations have not been started yet. The bottom part of the report, okay, this is very specific. It shows each individual reconciliation. And it includes details like its status and who the preparer is and who the approver is. Okay, so it gives you all that information at your fingertips. So, all right, and so that finishes up our discussion around account reconciliations. Now let's jump to the third core functionality, the third core module. That's the task management module. So the task management module allows you to create checklists like month-end and audit lists. And it gives users an easy way to see all tasks assigned to them. And it gives managers an easy way to see which tasks are complete and which are still in progress. And you can see other use cases here on the slide. So let's take a look at what a specific task looks like in BlackLine. Here's an example of a month-end close task. So it's to gather up all your property tax invoices for the month. You'll notice it's got a similar look and feel to the account reconciliations that we saw earlier. Now, the important pieces here of the screen to point out, you got a purpose section, okay? And that's, again, where you can enter a detailed description on what the task is. You have an instruction section over here, and that's where you could enter detailed step-by-step instructions on how to complete the task. You got a comment section, and then you have a supporting document section down here where you could attach any file, like the actual property tax invoice invoice that you get. It could be PDF or whatever format that you get it in. Now, all the information about why the task needs to be done and how to complete it is here in one spot. So again, imagine if an employee goes out on PTO or resigns from the company. A lot of times their month-end tasks and how they complete them, they only exist in their head. If the tasks exist in BlackLine and the purpose and instructions are well written, someone taking on that task knows exactly what needs to be done and how to do it. This screen here, this shows the setup information about the task. Now I'm just going to touch on the important pieces here. So over here, you have a task due date. Okay, so that's telling you when the task is due. You have this team section over here. Okay, so this lets you assign essentially a backup team to the task. So if the person assigned to complete the task is unable to do it for any reason, any other users who are part of this backup team have permission to mark this task as complete. And you have an assignment setting section down here. This tells you the user who needs to complete the task, the frequency to complete it, and the frequency could be anything that you want to set it to. It could be monthly, quarterly, any type of frequency that you can come up with within your fiscal cycle. And lastly, let's talk about visibility. So just like with the account reconciliations, the system provides quick visibility into how many tasks are assigned to a user and what the status of each is. So here's an example of a dashboard a regular user sees when they first log in. It's showing me the number of tasks assigned to them and their status. So in this case here, okay, I have 21 tasks that I'm responsible to complete. 13 of them haven't been completed yet, or I'm sorry, 13 of them haven't even started yet. 2 of them have been marked as complete, but haven't been approved yet. And 6 of them have been final completed. And there's more reports available that management can use to see the status of tasks across the entire organization. So this report here, this would be a really useful report to a controller during close. You got a nice graph on top, okay, that shows the number of tasks by status. So in this example, what it's telling me is that 251 tasks have been reviewed and marked as complete. The bottom section here, that gives you a list of each individual task. Shows me things like task description, the due date, and person responsible for completing that task. So in your current world, you may be having status meetings with your team, or you may be emailing your team for updates on their close tasks. But with this system and its reporting and its dashboard, it quickly tells you where your team is at any point in time. Okay, one of my other favorite use cases for the task management module is around the yearly audit requests. So I was always part of this process at my prior companies. Every year, the auditors request a laundry list of documents. And I always had to supply security reports from our ERP system showing who could post journal entries and cut checks. And the process for handling these requests was very time consuming. The accounting manager would email the list of requested documents to the accounting team. The accountants would email the requested documents back to the manager, who then had to forward it to the auditors. And that came the frenzy for the manager. They were constantly tracking down accountants who haven't sent the requested documents, and they were constantly fielding questions from the auditors. And they just spent a massive amount of time managing this process. With BlackLine, you can create each audit request as a task and assign it to an accountant. So this slide is an example of what that would look like. It shows each audit request, person responsible, and due date. When the accountant gathers the requested documents, they could just then now attach it directly to the task. And they could also add any specific comments for the auditors directly to the task. Now, here's the neat part. All you need to do now is give the auditors access to the system to view these tasks directly. They now have the ability to download the requested documents directly from the task and see any comments from the accountant. And for the accounting manager, this should significantly reduce their workload. They don't need to forward files as they receive it anymore. And questions from the auditor should be reduced. The system provides real-time reporting to show them which audit requests are complete and which are not. So let's take a look at let's take a detailed look at the highlighted audit request here. So it's actually a request from the auditors for a trial balance report. So take a look at the supporting documents section here. The accountant has already run the trial balance report and attached it. An auditor would just come into the screen and download the report themselves. They'll also see any comments the accountant left for them. So managing your audit like this should be a huge time saver for your team and the audit team, and it could result in a lower audit bill as well. So that completes the overview of the task management module. Now let's take a look at some of our customer case studies. So the first one here is Air Medical Group, and they're the largest independent provider of air medical services in the world. Some of the challenge they faced were that they were spending too many hours to complete their balance sheet account reconciliations. The main reason was having to compare data from multiple data sources. So they were having to compare ERP and bank statement and subledgers and supporting schedules. And it just resulted in a very long close process. Another big challenge was they just had lack of visibility into which month-end processes were completed and if they were completed on time. Now, after implementing BlackLine, they reduced their balance sheet account reconciliation time from 80 hours to 40, a 50% reduction on just the balance sheet reconciliations alone. They use the matching functionality now to save time reconciling their bank account balances. And at any point in time throughout the close, they know which month-end tasks were completed and which are not. Okay. Medcom Sciences. So they actually provide toxology and DNA testing. And they have about 400 balance sheet account reconciliations to complete each month. So some of the challenges that they faced were that their monthly close was actually taking 20 to 30 days to complete. They had about 100 inactive or zero balance accounts that were being manually reconciled. I kind of call those the dormant accounts. And their employees were stressed out because they were having to work so many extra hours. And what it was leading to was that inaccuracies on their P&L statements that they were handing out quarterly was becoming an issue. Now, after implementing BlackLine, they now closed the books in just 6 days. So they went from 20 to 30 days to just 6. Those 100 dormant accounts are now being auto-reconciled by the system, eliminating the need for accounts to spend any time on them. They were also able to eliminate an existing FTE in a vacant position due to all the time saved. And now their annual audit takes 2 to 3 weeks left. Sorry, 2 to 3 weeks less. Their auditors actually access the balance sheet reconciliations directly in BlackLine. All right, and the last customer case study here is GoodRx. So they're a company that provides information and discounts about prescription drugs. So some of the challenges that they faced were that they were doing their balance sheet reconciliations in Excel, saving them into shared drives, and then having to manually tie back to the general ledger. And what was happening was users were either changing the Excel files or posting late journal entries, and it was causing version control issues for them. So it forced users to constantly have to revalidate their reconciliation. They also had a lot of dormant GL accounts no longer in use, but they still had to check them in case a journal entry was accidentally posted to it. And on top of all these issues, they were growing and expanding into new business lines. Now, after implementing BlackLine, they eliminated all their manual spreadsheet reconciliations. So they reduced time spent reconciling dormant accounts by 30%. Just by using the system's auto certification rules. And they gained the capacity to grow the company without having to grow the department. Okay, and that concludes today's webinar. I do hope it was informative and helpful. I want to thank everyone for taking the time to join today. If you have any questions, again, I think there was a few that were left into the Q&A that came through the Q&A. We will get back to you with answers on those. And you could also always email us at info@revelwood.com if you have any questions. Also, just a reminder, we'll be reaching out, asking for a quick 15-minute introduction call. We hope you can accept that meeting and just have a quick conversation with us. So that's it. Thanks again, everybody. Appreciate it.